Today I'm going to talk about how to use selectors in CSS to find what you need and style it. So let's say that I want to make these references on my page. This is the Wikipedia project, so I'm working with a Wikipedia page. I want to make the references really small, or maybe I want to make them disappear altogether because I don't like how much space they take up. So I could come in and say, well, look, that is a ordered list. So I'm going to go ahead and select the ordered list and say font size extra small, color red. I always make the color red just when I'm testing it so I can see if it works. Save that and reload the page. That succeeded. We'll notice the footnotes went extra small too, which I might not mind. Any other ordered lists are also going to turn extra small. So in this page, there aren't a ton of examples, but it wouldn't be great. And for example, let's say I wanted these C alsos to be small as well. Maybe I say OL, UL, save that. Now all the lists are small, but again, that's going to cause some issues. My table of contents just got small. Things I didn't want to get small got small. So I need to get more specific, and that's what IDs and classes were for in HTML. They're the way that you find what you want. So what I'm going to do here is find the references. And what I'm going to need to do is look at the code and actually look for the code that tells me what classes or IDs I could use here. So if we look at this thing, Chinese BBS, the social activity that never grows old, that's going to be something I can definitely search, and it'll be pretty unique. So if I look for the word Chinese in my source code, make this font size a little bigger so you all can see it. Oops, let's see if that works. Okay, yeah, there we go. Make this full screen. All right, so Chinese, there it is, Chinese thinking. I can now come back here and see that's that particular backlink has a particular class ID. That's on the list item. Now, if I look, what's the parent is this list. It's got the class references. This span header has the ID references. This span up here has the ID footnotes and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and take the references class to work with. That's going to be a nice one to use. So if we pop up to our CSS at the top, we can go ahead and where I had put ordered list and unordered list, I'm going to put dot, which is the CSS selector for a class, and the word references. Now the capitalization is going to matter, so hopefully the code said exactly class equals references. There I just found it to make sure, and I've got the spelling exactly right. There's actually something called ref list above I could use, but let's go ahead and use that for now. Class equals references. If I reload the page, zoom out a little bit so we can see, we now see these ones are small. And let's go to my table of contents. Table of contents is not small anymore. So I successfully found just the references. And oops, that's the real Wikipedia. Found just the references, and I shrunk them and I made them red. Presumably I didn't actually want them red, so once I've successfully shown off that I can do the selection, I can get rid of that red. I just use that because it's an easy way to make sure I know what I'm doing. All right, maybe I'll put it in multiple columns and see if that works. Nope, I think there's a special, I forget how you do that. There's a special way to do that. All right, I'm going to show you another trick that's even easier because it can be a little hard wading through that source code. When you're looking for references, this is just a lot of junk to look through, and it's hard to see the structure. Now, HTML actually exists in a nice tree-styled structure, so there are ways to see that more nicely. Now, if we go in, and let's suppose I wanted to get rid of this jump to link here. Your browser actually has built right into it a beautiful tool that shows you the code. So if I click right where I'm interested in, and I control click or right click if you have a right click button, and choose inspect element, that's going to bring up an element inspector. Yours might look a little bit different. There's all these different elements. This is for looking at JavaScript, which we're not interested in today. So you can shrink that down. Up top, there's HTML. There's also a phone simulator that we'll actually use later in the class. And there's this thing here that shows padding. So this shows the tree-like structure of HTML. It's the same code that we saw over here. So for example, div ID equals jump to nav. If I search the code here, ID equals jump to nav, there it is. The exact same code, but it's laid out here in this nice tree where each child goes sort of inside an arrow, and you can then expand and see the children of any given parent and what goes inside. The other really nice thing is when you highlight a link or an element in the code, it actually shows you on the page what you're looking at. So I can see, for example, this div body content selects all of this stuff that's blue on the page, whereas this div site sub selects just the from the Wikipedia part, and this jump to nav selects that jump to nav. So let's go ahead and look at those. Those ones actually use, see this says ID equals site sub, and this is ID equals jump to nav, and class equals MW jump. So an ID means there's only one of it on the page, and IDs are selected in CSS with the hashtag. So if I say jump to nav, color red, save that page, and reload this, you now see the jump to nav is red. The links are not red because links are colored by a more specific style. So I'd have to say jump to nav A, color red. That says take any anchor tag or any link and make it red as well. Now the links will also turn red. And then this other one was called site sub, and that one has a different capitalization. It's going to matter again, the capitalization, so I've got to go lowercase site, uppercase S in sub, and then UB, site sub. Let's make that yellow just so I can make sure I've got the right selectors. Yellow, beautiful, that changed colors. So now if I wanted to change that to display none for the jump to nav and maybe the site sub, I'm going to make font size extra small. Position absolute, top 10 pixels. I'm going to throw it up at the top of the page and make it tiny. And there it goes from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. So that is a very handy tool. It's going to let you dig in and find a specific piece of code you're interested in. Now sometimes, like let's say that I was interested in making this software and hardware section of a different style. Sometimes when you inspect the element, there may or may not be the selector. So actually in this case there is. It turns out Wikipedia puts a unique ID on every section. So if I wanted to say ID software and hardware, that's going to work. Wow, I thought that wasn't going to work, but it does. Sometimes there won't be an ID. If there's no way to identify the element you want to change, that's one case where you would have to actually change the code. And so that would be, although you're supposed to only change CSS, that would be a case where it is acceptable to dig in and just put an ID on something. In this case, we now have these paragraphs that come after. I made software and hardware red. So that's pretty much all there is to it. Again, this inspect element tool is really handy. Let's say I want to get rid of these edit buttons. Click on the edit button, inspect element. It brings me right there. And I can see the edit button comes inside of the span class equals MW-edit section. That's a good example of a class because there's lots and lots of edit buttons versus an ID. So .mw edit section. Let's see if I got that right. MW edit section. That's going to include those little brackets. Display none. And, ooh, that didn't work. What did I do wrong? Oh, edit. There is no space in the edit section. Okay, you got to get that typing exactly right or it doesn't work. You can X out of this just with that, and now you'll see all those little edit buttons just went away. So there they are, they're gone. Give you an example of a time where you would have to actually edit the code. Let's say that I wanted this software and hardware section to work as a sidebar. So I'm going to take that whole section and move it. If I go and inspect the element, although I have a nice way to select software and hardware, there is no element that goes around each of these paragraphs. You'll see this tree-like structure shows it's flat. It just goes header, paragraph, 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 paragraph. If I want to change all that stuff and make it move, I'm going to need to actually add some code. So let me show you how I do that. Let's suppose I want to float that whole thing. I'm going to find it in my code, software and hardware. Okay, there we are. I'm going to shrink this a little bit. Software. Where is it? There it is. All right, H2. I'm going to put a div around. Now the div won't actually change the display, but I'm going to put an ID on it. ID equals SWHW div. Okay. Now divs, IDs have to be unique, so it's not a bad idea if you think it might be used to just add something. So I'm going to add TH for Tom Hinkle as a note that this is my own div. I'm going to actually copy that exactly so that I get it right in my CSS. And that div's going to have to end. It's going to end actually right before the next header. So I'm going to find that header, and I'm going to put H2 there. I'm going to save it. Now I'm going to show you what happens when I reload this. And I'm going to go back to inspect element, and you're going to see in this tree, I now have, oops, where'd that go? I now have a div that selects, it's a little hard to see because the page isn't small enough, but it actually selects that entire section here. Let me shrink it down so we can see it. Software and hardware. Where'd you go? That div is now that whole section. Actually, it looks like that div includes some other, oh, you know what? I actually got it wrong. I put the end of it in the wrong place. That was a good thing I checked that. Let's find where I put the end of that div. Oh, I put an end H2 tag instead of an end div. There we go. End the div tag. Now I should find this div. Where'd you go? Software and hardware. There it is. You see it highlights that whole section. And now that I have a selector for it, I can go back up to my CSS. I paste so I get the spelling exactly right. First thing I'm going to do is just change the color. Let's make it green just so that I can make sure I got the selector right. And we can see I didn't because I forgot I added TH, no software hardware div. Huh. Oops. Look at that. Oh, brutal. My text editor put in curly quotes. That is horrible. You wouldn't use such a bad text editor like I just did. This is a reason not to use the built-in text editor, by the way. A curly quote like that will totally destroy your HTML. Let's put in regular quotes. Sorry about that. Don't ever use text edit. Now we know why. And boom, instantly this thing is green. Isn't that nice? We got it, so make sure. All right, so now that I have a selector for it, I could say float right width 30%. And oh, if I'm going to put it in a border, give it a background. We'll give it some padding, the whole bit. and boom, now it's a sidebar. So that was a case where you would have to edit the code because there was no unique selector for that particular section, but that's an acceptable, I'd say that's the one acceptable use of editing the code, is to add an ID or add a wrapper around something you need to move. All right, there you go. I hope that is helpful.